The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style.
Good day and welcome to the Big H Podcast. My name is Mike Heise and I'll be your host. Today's guest, Dr. Ben Zoghlin, has cared for Hilton families for over 4 decades, continuing the legacy of his father, Dr. Leon Zoghlin. He's witnessed big changes, paper charts to electronic records, and house calls to telemedicine. Yet family medicine's core, caring for people and building lasting relationships, remains the same. Today we discuss his career, his family's medical legacy, and serving generations of Hilton residents. Dr. Zoghlin, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
I want to start off with, tell me a little bit about your mother and father, where you grew up, and your siblings.
Let's see. My mother's from Philadelphia. My father's from Chicago. They met at a summer school session in Madison, Wisconsin. And after they married, they spent 7 months traveling through Europe and the Middle East. And when they came back, my father started his internship training in Binghamton, and then his residency in Danville, Pennsylvania, where I was born. And then a number of practices for brief stints in Long Island, and then Shortsville, actually, where my 2 younger siblings were born. And then had another brief stint in Ohio, and then moved to Hilton in 1964. So I started first grade in Hilton. Spent all my primary and secondary education in Hilton. And then I went to my undergraduate training at Brandeis University, which is just outside of Boston, and then medical school in Buffalo. Had met my wife, my later-to-be wife, when I was an undergrad, and we applied to graduate schools in the same cities, and Buffalo was the only one that matched for both medical school and law school. Mm-hmm. So we ended up in Buffalo, which actually turned out to be a very good thing. It was a good 4 years in Buffalo. We then moved to Pittsburgh, where I did my residency training in family medicine, and then in 1987 moved back to Rochester area and joined my father's practice, which had been started in about 1979. My dad had practiced with Charles Keller for a number of years over on Lake Avenue, next to the Baptist Church in Hilton. And they were joined by a British fellow named Jeff Stead for a number of years. And then my dad and Jeff Stead split off and started their own practice in 1979. So they had been in that practice for about 8 years, when myself and one of my residency buddies, Bob Blackburn, came from Pittsburgh and joined that practice in 87. And I practiced there until September of 2024. Yeah, that was my professional career in a nutshell.
Yeah. Dr. Stead, I remember him. He had an untimely passing, right?
Yes. I believe it was about a year after he and my dad started the new practice that he had gotten into running, and he was running along the, training. He was wanting to train enough to run in marathons. And so he was running along the parkway, and apparently long distance runners don't like to always run on the left side because the road is slightly cambered. and it's stressful on your ankles if you're always running on the same side. So he happened to be running on the right side of the road, and it was the early morning hours. Somebody coming home, a night shift worker coming home, hit him when he was in the parkway, and he died in that accident. So, yeah, that was tragic. He had two young children at the time, and we remained pretty close with their family for several years after. His widow is also now deceased, but they were part of the I call it the Dunbar Road gang.
Yes.
So the Steads, the Sorensens, the Yoxheimers, Jurgens we were talking about earlier lived a couple doors away. Ironically, one of my son's best buddies' families bought the house the Steads had owned for many years on Dunbar Road. So then it became the Domino household.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep, sure do.
His siblings, yeah.
I said you met your wife when you were in your undergrad?
Right.
Okay. What was like that first meeting? Like what sparked the two of you?
Actually, the first time we met, my wife has told me that she was totally turned off. That I was way too full of myself and talking about myself way too much. And so I don't remember what she said later changed her mind. I guess I started listening a little bit and stopped talking about myself. But we ended up dating through most of our undergraduate years, and then we decided we wanted to stay together, so we looked for graduate programs that would be in the same city. So when we moved to Buffalo, we moved in together a year before we moved to Buffalo, and we moved off campus. So we lived off campus in a house in Waltham, which is a very working class town. So all the houses were divided into multiple bedrooms and small little kitchens.
Mm-hmm.
So we lived in Waltham for the last year of college, and then lived near the Main Street campus of the medical school, or the Main Street campus of UB, which was where the medical school was at that time. That's sort of how we met. We, both Mindy and then a small core of friends that we hung out with most of the time in college, and some of whom we've kept in touch with.
Where's she from originally? Where's she?
She's from Long Island originally, Oceanside, Long Island. And for years, her parents are both deceased, but we made frequent visits when our kids were little to their maternal grandparents. And she has a sister, and her sister's family and children lived on Long Island for many years. They just recently moved into New York City, but for years they lived on Long Island as well.
Off air, we were talking about Mindy and what she does for a career. Tell our listeners.
Yeah, she's an attorney who, with a particular interest in environmental and land use, so zoning and other land use litigation. So she's done a number of things in that area. She had a little bit more general practice for years in Greece, and so did a little bit of everything else except matrimonial law. She never wanted to do matrimonial law.
Is that like divorce proceedings? Okay.
Divorce stuff, yeah. The only she said it's the only field of law where your client will do something against your best advice just to hurt the other person. So that was never. She very quickly found people that did do that kind of law, so she always had a good referral base. So anytime somebody brought that up, she's like, no. But she did a little bit more general practice, other types of litigation, and then decided that she wanted to focus on environmental and land use. And really for the last more than 10 years was doing that. And a lot of it had to do now with alternative energy development, land use for various other things. It's become a big issue. I hear in our neighborhood, where to put solar installations and so on. She had a number of cases involving that. And she really developed a practice that became pretty well known, certainly in upstate New York, but even they had a big case in downstate New York with the New York State Gaming Commission that was trying to figure out where where was a good place to put another casino, to put a casino in New York City. So, yeah, the subjects were very varied, but all in that land use and environmental and zoning area. So, yeah.
What was dating like where you were in med school, she's in law school? Oh, do you guys have any time for each other?
By that time, we didn't have. Yeah, no, we didn't. And med school was very busy, but we were living together, so we saw each other at breakfast, depending on what rotation I was on, how early I had to get out of the house, weekends and things like that. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of time that we spent together. We, took vacations together, and the even busier time would have been my intern year in Pittsburgh. So, and that was when, Rachel was born when I was a second year resident, but so Mindy was pregnant with Rachel while we were in Pittsburgh. Rachel was born at McGee Women's Hospital in Pittsburgh. So, yeah, that was an exciting time because I was learning a lot, and I was, busy both with required rotations, but I was also starting to do some moonlighting in the local emergency departments, and that was fun for me because I got to see and do a lot more stuff than I might have otherwise. But yeah, the program I went to was very good. The faculty was very good. They had a very good reputation. So, and they could be selective in their recruiting of residents. So all my residency mates were also very good. We didn't have any shirkers. Everybody pitched in and everybody did their thing. And so, yeah. And the senior residents above me that, when I was a first year resident, the second and third year residents were also very good. And, a lot of them sometimes have more influence on the trainees that are younger than them, even more so than the attending doctors do. You learn a lot from the more senior residents. So, the fact that the ones that were there ahead of me were also good was, a bit to my benefit. So,
I don't know if this is an odd question, but what was a typical day of med school and and being in your residency?
Med school at that time was still very much divided up between the preclinical years. So the first 2 years, it was very much lecture hall and classroom and lab. There were labs. And then you would spend a lot of time studying. So afternoons and or evenings were spent, going over the material and stuff like that. The second 2 years you spend in the hospital. So you basically are following around house staff in the hospital. You're actually seeing patients. You're actually interacting with the medical record. So at that time, it was writing notes and paper charts. So that's kind of what the day-to-day was for me. Mindy had classes, and actually the law school was on the Amherst campus. So there was a shuttle bus, we did have a car. So when I didn't need to use it, she drove to the Main Street campus and did her classwork. But she also spent a fair amount of time in the law library and, again, studying and trying to be prepared. She was actually in a joint degree program, so it was a JD PhD program, so in law, and the PhD was in public policy. So she was having classwork, in that, for that program, as well as her law school classwork. So we both had a lot of time in classes. And the rotations, once you get to the third and fourth year of med school, your rotations last a similar amount. The timing is similar to what the house staff is doing. So you get there early and you go home late. I think it was somewhat after I finished medical school. I think even after I finished residency, that there started to be national regulations about how many hours a resident could work in a row and how much time off you had to have before you could come back again. That wasn't in place yet. So often you were in medical school, you might be there 80 hours, on the hospital floors, 80 hours a week. So, it was busy. And then you come home, eat, sleep, and do it again the next day. So it was, what do they say? Wash, rinse, and repeat. So,
going through med school residency, was there ever a time like you thought to yourself, "Oh, this is a challenge," or did you always know I'm going to do this come hell or high water?
I think that decision was sort of passed maybe 2 or 3 years into into college where I had a pretty rough first year,
Mm-hmm.
and it could have been a decision point. Actually, lots of my friends that were pre-med at the time were suddenly now not pre-med. And the semi-truth, semi-joke at that time was that organic chemistry, which typically got taken as a sophomore for pre-meds, was the weeding out process. So, the people that didn't do well in that changed their major and
Right.
went a different way. So that was a little more of the deciding point. Once the other deciding point was getting into med school, because I didn't have a great grade point average, largely because of my first maybe year and a half class grades. So it wasn't a gimme that I was getting in. I think I applied to 25 med schools and got into 2.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, one of them was Buffalo, where my wife also got into law school. So that was the other deciding point, was getting in, and I got in rather late. So there were people that knew by the end of their junior year that they were very early in their senior year of college that they were in, and so they could coast a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't in until, it must have been the spring of my senior year. I didn't know. I got waitlisted at one place and then got in, and then I got into Buffalo. So I wasn't coasting. I was,
Mm-hmm.
but I was. That's the point where I already knew I was committed, and I think I had the thought that if I didn't get in, I would do some graduate work and then apply again.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily, I didn't have to do that. But actually, my father did that. He didn't get in the first time he applied to med school.
Right.
So he did graduate work in psychology and then applied again. He got in.
I don't know if this
Yeah.
is similar to that question, but what point in your life did you decide you wanted to be a physician? Was it watching your father? When was it?
It probably was.
Mm-hmm.
And I always liked things related to the sciences. But there were certain things that my dad did, or I heard, would overhear his conversations on the phone, or I'd hear him talk a little bit about what he did at work. And actually, in high school, I was working at his office. So this is the office on Lake Avenue when he was in practice with Dr. Keller and Dr. Stead. So I started doing lab work for him. His lab technician trained me. I didn't have any official certification, but she just showed me, this is how you do blood counts, and this is how you do urinalyses or things like that. So I just started doing lab work like after school and in the summer months.
Mm-hmm.
So I was starting to have patient contact when I was pretty young. So that was part of it. And, I still joke about, we would be walking around town somewhere and people would yell out to my dad, "Hey, Doc." And I'll go, "Who's that? Who's that?" And he'd say, "I don't know. It's a patient."
Right.
And he wasn't very good with names.
Right.
I don't think he made an effort, but my mother was very good with names.
Uh-huh.
And she knew names and phone numbers of 50 people off the top of her head. But my father, no, not so much that he knew names. He just knew it was a patient. But just the fact that you'd be walking around town, whether it was at the carnival or at the parade or, just walking to the grocery store or whatever, that somebody would recognize you. And I thought, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't anything about the job so
Right.
much, but it was just like, you could be that person. And the funny thing is, even funnier maybe than when it happened to my dad, is that indeed it happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So once I had been in practice a little while, when I was at the grocery store or somewhere else, I was better with names because I sort of took after my
You
mom.
tried it?
So people
Tried hard?
So people would recognize me, and it got to be that I often did the grocery shopping on Sundays when I was still working. Sunday was the grocery day, and people there were my regulars that I would run into at Wegmans. So we were always checking out whatever was in everybody's cart, making sure they were buying healthy food.
Getting back to your mom and dad, we talked off air. Your mother also served as a school board member. Talk to me about her
Right.
service with that.
Well, she had a background in education. So when my father was in medical school, my mother graduated from college when she was 20, and she went to the University of Pennsylvania as a commuter. She lived in Philadelphia, and actually we went back there to her old neighborhood. I realized it was only 6 blocks from from school for her.
Okay.
So when she finished high school, she would walk to college, literally. And so she had her degree in education. And after they married, my dad, they moved to Chicago because my dad was in med school in Chicago. And my mother taught in the public school system, taught kindergarten. And she would talk about that. It was a very poor neighborhood. She was saying a lot of her job was making sure every kid had clean underwear. Was her joke, but it also meant that they weren't hungry when they came to school or things like that. So she taught for a few years, and then she didn't work outside of home because she was busy having myself and my siblings for the next several years. But once our family had settled in Hilton, she did some substitute teaching in the district, and then she also was on the school board for a number of years. I'm trying to remember that I was in school then, so it must have been in the late 60s, early 70s that she was a school board member. And actually, she went back to when we were all old enough to sort of take care of ourselves. She went back to school at Brockport and got her master's in education. So, but she never had a full-time teaching job. She also did other things in the school. She volunteered as a reading support for students. And there was a program called Junior Great Books, which was like condensed versions of famous literature things that she would, the class, students would read, and then she would come into classes and discuss those. So she maintained her interest in education. She was very interested she volunteered in a couple of things. One was called the Fresh Air Fund, where young kids from New York City would come up and spend a couple weeks, I think it was a couple weeks at a time, with host families in the countryside. So, and we were hosts for many years.
Okay.
And we had the same young man stay with our family a number of years. There was a little hiatus when we lived in Ohio, because we lived in Shortsville for a couple of years, and he was with us then. Then when we lived in Ohio, my mother wasn't part of the program then, but when we moved to Hilton, she became part of the program again. And James Hawkins was his name, came again. And, we had a long-standing relationship. He died, unfortunately, very young. But we maintained a relationship with he and even some of his family. And then we had, when I was a little older, we had a couple of younger kids again that were younger than we were, but I think my siblings and I, particularly Jason, enjoyed having them. I don't think we didn't ever have a girl. It was always boys. So as boys, we were, playing baseball. And James Hawkins was a very good athlete. And I remember when we lived on Hillside Drive, the Hillside Drive gang that included names like Furlong, Wheelahan, Gerslin, Littlefield, would all play baseball. And at that time, Hillside Drive was a dead-end street, so there wasn't a lot of traffic. But yeah, James Hawkins made his bones with the boys. And,
boys.
All the people I named all, went on to be really good athletes for Hilton for years. So I remember Mike Wheelhan and the others.
Was it Pat Littlefield?
Pat and Dave.
Yep.
Dave was a football player. Pat played a couple sports. Pat was a soccer player, because I don't think, actually, when Pat Littlefield was in high school, we didn't have football yet.
Mm-hmm.
Football came to Hilton when I was eighth grader, something like that.
Yeah.
Another, this is sort of another historical fact. My father campaigned fairly vigorously against football being added to the
Because of
program.
the injury and
because
stuff?
of the injury rate, yeah. Which I think later turned out to be maybe only a little bit more than soccer and some of the other contact sports. But yeah, my father was against Hilton getting football.
I don't know.
Let us play. My brother played 1 year until he got blocked by Steve Thorson into the next county.
Right.
And I played 1 year as well before switching to soccer. So,
Tell me, before we get into some more of your high school activities, tell me about your siblings.
Yeah. I have an older sister, Gayla, is 2 years ahead of me in school, who went on also to become a family physician. And Met her husband also, preceded me at Brandeis for her undergrad, and met her husband at Brandeis like I met my wife at Brandeis. So we had that in common. They settled more for where my brother-in-law is from, in the Detroit area. So she had all her career. She went to the University of Michigan Medical School, so they settled in Michigan. And I'm the second oldest, and my younger brother Jason, he did college on the 6-year plan, so he went to Potsdam and University of Idaho, and then Colorado State, and then lived and worked in Japan teaching English in Hokkaido, on the island of Hokkaido in Japan, and then moved back to the Rochester area. And then my younger sister Sonia went to college at Haverford. Actually, she was in the first class admitting women as freshmen to what was before then an all young men college, and then went on to law school at NYU and has worked her entire career in as a public defender, both in Brooklyn and then in the Rochester area. That's been her commitment, is to provide every person with a sound legal defense.
Now, you off air, you were telling me a little bit about Jason. You said he taught for a little bit.
Taught for
and then
a little bit, yeah.
He found a niche in something else.
Yeah, he just decided he'd rather work with his hands, so went into doing more like property management and remodeling and stuff like that, and sort of learned things along the way, from some of his Hilton buddies that had gone into the trades, the guys that knew how to do siding and knew how to do, plumbing and things like that. So he learned a little bit of everything, and, did a good enough job at what he did that, he had enough repeat customers, and he was able to make his way doing that. And he's sort of slowed down a little bit, but still does some side jobs. But the nice thing is I can always call on him to help me out and stuff. Helped me fix my siding recently.
Now, off air, we were talking, your mom passed away a couple years ago. I know there are many listeners that were treated by your father. Tell them a little bit about how he's doing now.
Yeah, he'll be 99 next month. And he's lived the last several years in assisted living, first at St. John's and then at the Jewish home, and just recently had a fall and has had some decline in his health. So he's now at the Jewish home in the skilled nursing area. But he's cognizant of his surroundings and of us, and we see him pretty often, share pictures, and update him with the family goings on and things like that. But he worked until he was in his mid 70s, and the last few years were part time. But he certainly saw a lot of changes in medicine. He retired when the practice was still private. The practice that he started in 1979 was sold to Rochester Regional Health in 2019. So what is that, 40 years of private practice. And certainly he saw a number of partners come and go. Unfortunately, lost Jeff Stead pretty early on. And lost Eric Cederstrom at a very young age also, unfortunately.
Did he pass away to a disease?
Yeah, he had cancer. He had a non-smoker's type of lung cancer.
Okay.
Very sad. He was, very sweet and kind person. Just never had a bad thing to say about anybody. He was a good physician as well, and a good partner and a hard worker. But beyond that, he was just a super nice person. And our kids got to know his kids a little bit, but we've kept actually a little bit in touch with his kids over the years. But they've done well. But yeah, over my father's career, he had some very longtime associates. Was one of the probably early people to work with a PA. So Dennis Goldsmith joined the practice before I did, within a couple of years of my dad establishing the practice, and worked for many years with him. So it was one of the early examples in the area of a primary care physician, sort of extending what he could do with his practice in terms of numbers by having physician's assistants. So that was one of the early, what are they called now, mid-level practitioner relationships. And we had then a number of mid-level, both PA and nurse practitioners in the practice over the years after Dennis. But Dennis was by far the longest tenured person, more than 30 years, practicing with my dad. So, and us. And he did a number of things. I think one was living in the community he thought was very important. Living in the community that your practice was in. And as I said, he could never remember people's names particularly, but he always had, a presence and thought that was important. And he made house calls, and as did we when needed. But he had a thing that he called the reverse house call. So the reverse house call was that people came to our house after hours to have something checked out. Mm-hmm. So when they built their house on West Avenue, part of the design was purposefully having right at the front step there were two entries, the main front door and then a little side front door, and that front door went into his study. So he could see patients there, and they could come in that door, and he would see patients there. So somebody would call him on a weekend or in the evening. If it was convenient, for him, he would say, instead of meet me at the office and having to go and open up the office, right, he would just say, come over. Right. And, he kept a little bit of equipment, an otoscope and a stethoscope and a few other things so he could take a look at an ear or a throat, or somebody would cut themselves and he would say, come over here first. And he would say, yeah, that needs stitches. And we'd go to the office and do that.
I was one of those, by the way.
Really?
We were playing basketball in my friend's garage. I tried to dunk and my arm kicked back and hit a glass window and totally cut up my elbow. Urgent care wasn't around. We called your dad, and he met us at the office. At the office, he stitched me up. Yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that was sort of exactly. But sometimes he would have people come to the house first to see what it needed. If it needed stitches, he would put a dressing on, or to give them instructions or whatever. And if it was, he had a shelf in his study that had actually the powdered antibiotics that you would mix up with water, so they had a good shelf life. So for kids that came, that indeed there's a throat infection or an ear infection, he would just mix up the antibiotic and give it to them right there. So, or if it was something by prescription, he could write a prescription. In those days, there were still paper prescriptions. That was what he termed the reverse house call. Okay. So that was one of his claims to fame, was pioneering the reverse house call. And the other thing that sort of marked his practice was, I think, after a number of years in practice and seeing the situation with that primary care was in, and that people in general, and Hilton was very much a working community. Hilton was Kodak. Actually, people used to ask my father when he would say he was from Rochester, "Oh, do you work for Kodak?" And his stock answer was, "Oh, sort of," because when Kodak bonuses got paid out, everybody paid their doctor bill. Right. And in those days, sometimes people paid at the time of visit, and sometimes they put it on their bill. So one of my jobs actually in the office, in addition to doing the lab work, I also had learned the secretarial stuff, was billing. Well, the first job I had was just licking the envelopes and putting stamps on it. So every month, at the end of the month, there was a bin that had the ledgers that had a balance, and a bin that had all the paid up ledgers. And we just made copies of the ones that had a balance, and had to fold them and stuff them in envelopes and lick the envelope, and then put stamps on them. There was actually we did have a postal meter. I think we did. So that was one of the fun things when I was little, was putting all the envelopes into the postal meter and have it go ka-chunk and put the stamp on the envelope. But that was back in the day. So but because he saw what was going on with medical care, he became a big advocate for a national health program, and there was and is still a group of physicians called Physicians for a National Health Program that's advocating for a Medicare for all system. Just now, you're starting to hear politicians talk a little bit about advocating for a Medicare for all type system. But I think it always bothered him that there were people that avoided care or didn't get care because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And certainly people that didn't get preventive care because they couldn't afford it. So, the whole idea that everybody, when they finally came to the point where they were going to get care, were sicker than they should have been,
right,
because they never got preventive care.
Right.
Yeah. So that was his other thing. And in his early 80s, when he was still more active, in things outside of his practice after he retired from active practice, he was going around campaigning with PNHP, the Physicians for a National Health Program. So he was giving talks to Rotary clubs and Lions clubs and so on about what a national health program would be like, and why it was an efficient way of giving care, and you could give better care and it would cost less and things like that. So I watched him do that, and that was something that he was always interested in, kept doing for quite a number of years. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about your own children and where they branched off to.
Our daughter Rachel how old is Rachel? She'll be 41 in August. So she was born during our years in Pittsburgh. Went through all her schooling in Hilton schools. Went to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, and then moved to Washington, D.C., worked a couple years in the restaurant business, met her future husband when they worked in the same restaurant together, and then decided she would go to law school, so she went to American University. It's called the Washington College of Law at American University.
My sister-in-law went there too.
Is that right? And then was interested in immigration law, worked for a couple of years, actually several years, for a firm that did private immigration work, and then decided that she wanted to do more nonprofit work. So she got a job with a nonprofit called HIAS, which stands for Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, I think it is, which was formed during the big migration of Eastern European Jews, and the idea was to help them get settled in the new country. But it became a legal advocacy group, and then as time went on and immigrants started coming from different places, they sort of branched out and were dealing with immigrants in general, but they kept the name. So started working for them, mainly teaching attorneys that to do pro bono work in the immigration area. So they need people to represent asylum seekers or people facing removal or deportation, things like that. And she is actually still working for HIAS. And she has two children, ages almost 6 and 4. And let's see, my son Jacob.
Wait, and Rachel, she's in Mexico now?
She and her husband moved to Mexico City last December. Yeah, and HIAS has an office, I think, in Mexico City, and some of her work is remote. It's done remotely. Most of her trainings that she does of attorneys that are planning to do pro bono work in the immigration field are done by Zoom anyway. So she's working from there. Jake was born at Lakeside, actually, in Brockport, and went through all of his schooling at Hilton schools. I think Rachel, both of them were active in marching band. Rachel and Winter Drumline, and Rachel played volleyball for a year, I think, or 2, and Jacob was a wrestler for 3 of his 4 years. Jake was also one of the first in the first group to get a
IB diploma?
An IB diploma, yeah. That was the first year that they had graduates. In his year, I think 4 students got IB diplomas. So that was something he was very proud of and worked hard for. and then he went to his undergraduate in Haverford College in Philadelphia, and then went on to law school at the same place that Rachel went, Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C. He went right after college. I remember just loading up his car. He didn't come home from Haverford. He emptied his dorm room. It filled a Toyota Corolla to the brim, except for the space to sit and drive, and took all his belongings to Washington. So, and then he met his later to become wife, and when she moved to Cleveland to go to med school, he moved to Cleveland as well and spent some years there, and then back in Philadelphia when she was doing her residency, and now back in Rochester. So he is now working at Underberg and Kessler, doing the same type of law that Mindy does, basically environmental, land use, litigation, and stuff like that. So, and he's all in.
He's all in.
He's all in.
His kids?
Yeah, he has 2 children. Yeah, he has a son. Ezra is 5, and Julian is 2.
And you said earlier off air that you babysit.
Yeah, Ezra is mine on Wednesdays.
Yeah,
yeah. So, and he's going to be going to kindergarten in the fall. And once in a while, when Julian's been sick, I've had both of them, which is challenging. 2 toddlers is challenging.
What's grandfatherhood been like for you?
Yeah, it's been good, and I've been fortunate in that, for the most part, my grandkids have been healthy. They've had a few health challenges, but I have to consider myself lucky. My daughter-in-law's brother lost a young child last year to a childhood cancer and a complicated medical situation, and so when your grandkids are healthy and you're just worrying about what to serve them for lunch and stuff like that, where to take them to interest them, and yeah, Ezra is very challenging because he's really smart, and so he's wants to play chess, but he wants to win.
You don't let him, right?
I don't let him win. No. That's my philosophy, is not to
Have
let
you
him
lost
win.
to him?
Yes.
Okay.
I have lost once.
Keep going, Ezra.
The funny thing is, he has a very good memory, which helps him, learning things, because he only has to see it once. So the one time that I moved into Czech, so I surrendered. I resigned, so he won that game. Now, whenever we're getting the chessboard ready, he's like, "Hey, Zeta, do you remember that time that you moved into checkmate?" It's months ago. Months ago. But yeah, he doesn't like to lose. So yesterday's loss came with a lesson of why he had a tantrum after he lost, and he said, "It wasn't fair because you're older than me." And I said, "Ezra, when we started this game, didn't you know that I was older than you?" And so we talked about the idea that you learn as you get older, and it's not always clear whether you're a parent or a grandparent and you talk to a kid that they get the message. But a few hours it was after this meltdown that we resolved eventually peacefully. He said, "Next time we play chess, something about I'm going to learn something new about chess."
Mm-hmm.
Because I was telling them that you don't get better unless you play somebody better than you.
Right.
So the way you learn anything, I said, and if you play sports or you have friends in school or you play chess with your friends, if you do this every time you lose, they're not going to be your friends anymore. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes this, but you won't learn how to play better unless you play somebody better than you. So again, you don't realize that stuff registers, but it does. Mm-hmm. Which is why you have to be careful about everything you say and do in front of your kids and grandkids. So I'm waiting to be blamed for the first time that he curses.
You were talking about your family and your extended family, a lot of lawyers and doctors. What's your dinner table like when you're all together?
Oh, wow. What's our dinner table like?
It must be very...
I have to.
do you bring...
I don't
Do you ever talk
about
television or books or movies?
yeah, books and movies, and
Your
now
career.
we talk about our grandkids, but and I do talk to my daughter-in-law about the medical field, but we try not to talk shop as
Right.
much because it always leaves somebody out.
Mm-hmm.
My son, again, I think talks shop with his mom more because they're in the same shop.
Right.
So I'll be like giving them the side eye and tapping my foot. It's like,
Right.
okay, how long is this going to last? You're talking about stuff that nobody else at the table understands.
Right.
But, no, we don't talk shop too much.
Good.
We try to talk about other family things.
Mm-hmm.
And, the latest thing now that my wife is trying to retire and I am retired is like planning vacations and travel and the things that we wanted to do, that we've been wanting to do more of. We took vacations with our kids and we tended to do summer in the Finger Lakes somewhere. So we became Finger Lakes fans. I'm a big proponent. I'm always trying to convince people to come up and visit us and see the Finger Lakes. And really, the Finger Lakes and the Niagara frontier are gems that we have. So whenever I travel, we traveled again to Utah last spring, and things are beautiful there, but they're brown. You come back here and everything's green in this time of year, and you think to yourself that you have to have a real appreciation for places that it does rain, and we have enough fresh water. Just came up on Jeopardy again. The biggest square mileage of fresh water is contained in the Finger Lake. In the world is contained in the Finger Lakes.
Oh.
No, not the Finger Lakes, the Great Lakes.
Did not know that.
Yeah, the Great Lakes.
Now, you retired in 2024. I was always wondering, being a physician and constantly dealing with people who are sick, and yes, some of that means they pass away. Mm-hmm. Did that ever take a mental toll, or how were you able to manage that?
Managing it maybe was more to think that, okay, this wasn't a good outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have many situations. I can't think of any situations where I thought, "Oh, that was my fault."
Right.
So.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
I didn't have many of those situations, but I would miss people, and I would. Again, there were certainly tragedies. People that lost a child. The first thing was to immediately sort of turn inward and appreciate my own situation. I still have a job. My wife is healthy. My children are healthy, and I appreciate that because not everybody has it. And I got to know in a personal way people that didn't have that lost a child or lost a spouse at an early age or that kind of thing. So, and the second thing was to dive back into work and think, hey, there's more that I can do. And, everybody that I convinced that they should have this screening test that got diagnosed with something early and got successfully treated, I thought that was, I would always mark that in the good column.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I saved every thank you note that I got, and I didn't do it a lot, but once in a while when I needed it, a shot in the arm, so to speak, I would sit down and take that stack of notes and look at them and, just to see, what, there was a time and there have been times where I've done something that somebody appreciated enough to write me a note. So I remember getting a note when I was a resident in Pittsburgh. One of my patients who had gotten a kidney transplant at a younger age was failing and needed a second transplant. And at that time, transplants were being done in Rochester. So he had come to Pittsburgh, which was a big national transplant center. And he was in the hospital, and it happened to be next door to the hospital that I was doing a rotation. So I stopped by their room, and his father was so appreciative just to see. Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't contribute anything to his medical care. He wasn't my patient. I was a resident, but a resident in another program. I wasn't writing orders in the chart. Mm-hmm. I wasn't checking in on them or taking their vitals or anything. I just was showing up to say hi. I hope you're doing better. Hope things are going to go well. And, that, young man's father never forgot it. And those were the things that,
Hmm.
You do something little like that, and you see the person's appreciation for it, that keeps you going through the other
Right.
stuff. So,
Right.
yeah. And, there were some successes, that somebody I sewed up, that their cut came out looking good. And I thought, and they said, hey, you can't even see that scar anymore. And I'm like, great, So
Right.
if I spend an extra few seconds thinking about how I was going to fix it, or just took my time and fixed it the way I thought was right, and it came out good, So I always tried to keep a perspective where I understood that I was doing some good things, and there's going to be some bad things.
Right.
And it's sort of still sad to look at the local paper and see former patients in the
Mhm.
obituary section.
Right.
But I had my fans that lived to be 100. One of my patients that was from Brockport had been a nurse at the old Lakeside Hospital. She told me some great Brockport stories, some
Mhm.
great Lakeside stories.
Right.
Lived to be over 100. And
Right.
was line dancing and very active well into her 90s, and driving herself to her appointments. She was great. Yeah. But yeah, those people.
Thank you for that honesty and that answer. I appreciate it. Going back to when you were growing up in Hilton, reflect back on those times when you were in elementary, high school, maybe some of your friendships, your teachers that you remember that made a difference or influence on you.
I think so many of the teachers made an impression. Also, I sort of inherited my mother's good memory, because I remember all their names. And some of them, at least amongst my generation, were legendary. So Betty McCluskey, Rosemary Foster,
Mm-hmm.
Janet Smith, and then getting into junior high, John Solinsky,
Mm-hmm.
Dick LeBeau, who became famous later,
Sure
in his
did.
own right. I'm trying to remember some of the other people in junior high, but Maury Zweigel, what's the other fellow that lived? His wife was a nurse at DuPont, Jim DuPont. Sometimes I remember more about their health history than I do. Who was that person? I can't remember their name, but they had high blood pressure. Their wife, something about.
Right.
I remember a lot of the connections, but I sometimes don't remember their name. That's happening a little more now that I haven't, been actively looking at charts for a
Right.
little while now. Now I run into people in Wegmans and they say hi, and it's like.
I remember you had strep throat a lot, but
right. I might remember that about a person, but yeah, their name escapes me, or their spouse's name escapes me. Anyway.
What are some high school buddies, or even?
Oh yeah, I mean, Chuck Partridge was my best friend from first grade. We went to first grade together, and a number of years ago, when Facebook first became a thing, one of my primary school classmates posted our first and second grade pictures. I think Jill Weiborg, I think, first did it, so I saved it to my archives or something. And I looked through and I could name, probably out of the 22 or 23 students, I could name like 20 of them. There was only 2 or 3 that I couldn't recognize, and I realized how much they still looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Several of them still look like that. But so Chuck and I were friends early on. And then junior high, I think Bob Gardner became a good friend. And I knew a lot of people. I guess I would say I didn't have as many close friends, but I knew a lot of people. And again, like my mom always remembered names, I always remembered people's names. So by the time I got to high school, I could probably have everybody in my class parade in front of me, and I would be able to tell you their name. And probably a good number of the juniors, the class behind me.
How many people graduated when you graduated? Remember?
I think 285. But our 50th reunion is coming up this fall, and I'm on the committee that's
Oh, good.
that's planning it. Actually, yeah, our fearless leader is Deb Buckout, whose maiden name is Nesbitt. So she and Terry Calabrese and Karen Conti, these are all ladies that have married and changed their name. But Jim Maxwell, who's Kevin Dornan, who have stayed around in the community, have been active on that. Chris Hall has been active planning that.
Did you play sports in high school or hobbies? Or
Yeah, I played sports pretty much every season.
Uh-huh.
I played football early on, but I was not big enough or fast enough, and I still blame it on the muddy day that they were timing everybody in the 40-yard dash. So we're on the end line. The coach blows the whistle. Dick, was his name Dick DiGiacomo? I don't remember his first name. Blows the whistle, and my foot slips. The foot I was going to push off. So I ran a fairly slow 40. So they're like, "You're a lineman." I weighed 138 pounds. So they said, "You're a lineman."
Right.
So I tried to be a lineman, and we had a pretty good second string. I became friendly with Jim Beeler, who's been an active builder and contractor in the community still, I think. Was on our second string squad. Don Harder, I can't remember everybody, but I did make the punting team. So they had me on the punting team, but I had to, in practice, I had to block the punt defense team, which the guy across from me was Bob Clark,
who
became our heavyweight wrestler.
Okay.
And played football all through high
Right.
school. Yeah, he probably weighed 220, and I weighed 138 pounds. So. And Danny Pocket, who also is still around, Danny Pocket was the punter. So every time he signaled for the snap, I would get run over, and Bob Clark was blocking punts left and right. It's like Danny Pocket was giving me the eye, like, "Can't you block him at least once?" So I sort of got the message that football was not to be. So the subsequent years in the fall, I changed to soccer. So the second year, as a sophomore, I played a fair amount. Bud Rose was the coach, legend.
Mm-hmm.
He taught math in the junior high. He's another Merton Williams teacher that was for years. Still around, I think, Bud Rose is. But had a fairly good sophomore year as a fullback on the soccer team. And there were some good freshmen coming up behind us. Junior year, I played on a team where there was only 3 juniors and all the rest were seniors. So again, the really good athletes, Wheelahan, Furlong, Montanarello. Trying to remember some of the other ones. I think one of the Horlevs might have been on it. Anyway, all good athletes. So I was relegated to the bench. I really disliked the coach quite a bit. Dick Belair, I think was his name, because he never played us. Mm-hmm. 2 of the other, I was one of 3 juniors on the team. The 2 other juniors were Brian Houck and Rick Stacy. And both of them got a fair amount of playing time. Brian Houck because he was the goalie. He was our starting goalie. And Rick Stacy because he was a good player and pretty fast. But I sat the bench a lot. Mm-hmm. And the coach didn't put us in even when we were way behind or way ahead. And I thought to myself, this is high school. Why? Mm-hmm. Why is he not putting the subs in? This game is out of hand in either direction. We either got it won or we're not going to win. But I stuck with it the next year. And the next year, I was one of only 3 seniors. Houck, Stacy, and myself were the seniors. I got a fair amount of playing time. But the bevy of juniors coming behind me were also very good. We had a pretty good year then. And those were the kids that the next year went on to win the state championship. So that was Mike Schluter, who went on to teach and coach in Churchville. Kevin Blackburn, Freddie DeLost, John Lee. All, great athletes in a number of sports. John Lee played basketball a lot. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember if there were any others, but they were a really good group. Alan Montanarella was in that group.
And they won the state title.
They won the state championship. I think that might be the only state championship that the Hilton soccer team has ever won. But anyway, they had a really good year. And then in the winter, I started wrestling, and as a freshman, I was on the freshman team. Then as a sophomore and junior, I was on a JV team. Didn't make varsity as a junior because Dave Juergens was in my weight class.
Speaking
he was
of
a
legends,
senior and went on to win the states that year. So this is one of the reasons I told my grandson that you don't get better without competing against somebody better than you, whether it's chess or wrestling, because I spent my junior year wrestling Dave Juergens and a couple of other very good wrestlers as seniors, and getting my butt whipped day after day, day after day. And I had a good classmate, Brian Houck, was also a good wrestler, and we were about the same weight. So it was one of those iron sharpens iron deals that I got to be pretty good as a senior, had a decent year as a senior. Just because I had good training the previous year. And I always really enjoyed the coaches, probably the wrestling coaches who I enjoyed the most.
Who was it at that time?
It was Al Kratz and Ron Heinmarch. I recently became friends with Ron Heinmarch on Facebook. So he lives out in Vegas and looks as young as can be. he's kept himself young. He looks young. And his wife, who's also a teacher, I think she taught in the junior high, maybe.
I think you're right.
But yeah, there are things that I learned from them, not only just technical things about the sport, but just things about, how you treat people. And there was always I always recognized the contrast between Al Kratz and Walt Tyke, who was the Spencerport coach. And we were big rivals with Spencerport at that time. We're not in their class anymore, so we don't wrestle them every year like we did year in and year out in the 70s. And they got the better of us probably most of the time. And Tyke ran his shop like an Army drill sergeant. And Al Kratz was like, hey, you got to be self-motivated. And I remember him dealing with Clark Barnard, and was telling him, he had to move up a weight class in his senior year, and he's like, you're going to have to be stronger to be successful in this weight class. You're going to have to climb some extra ropes after practice. Or, he was just telling him, this is what you need to do, but he's not going to be on his back to make him do it. He was going to have to do it, and he did. And he had a very successful senior year. And the other thing was trying to get Juergens down to a lower weight class his senior year against Spencerport, which he did, but everybody in our practice group knew that something was up because we were starting to take Dave Juergens down in practice, and that never happened. Dave beat the guy Stolpen against Spencerport that Kratz had him, go down a weight class to face, but the gambit was trying to have him pin that kid and have whoever went in Juergens' weight class win, and Dave won his match, but the whole thing didn't work out exactly as Kratz wanted. And I remember him coming up to Juergens at the end at practice the next Monday saying, you're going 145 the rest of the year. And he did, and won the states at that weight class. Okay. And we all went back to getting our heads kicked in practice. And we're like, yes. We were all relieved. Right. Yeah, that's the kid that we know he can be. He shouldn't be trying to suck weight down to that lower weight class. But yeah, he was killing it.
How about any clubs or instruments or things that you any involved? Did you have any time for that?
I played clarinet until 10th grade or so, and I was in marching band for a couple of the early years, and actually when I was in 8th grade, went to Germany with the marching band.
Who was the lead? Who was the director?
Dave Smalley. He was another character. So we went on tour in Germany. I got put on the bus with the leftovers.
What do you mean by leftovers?
They filled 3 buses, and we were the leftovers. Those days that there weren't too many hotels that could accommodate the whole band, so all the people except the people on the red bus would stay at one hotel, and the red bus would stay somewhere else. So I remember me, Greg Blossom, and I was one of the only boys playing a wind instrument. So, or a reed instrument. So I often got stuck with the drum line, which was also at the time mostly boys.
Mhm.
Some of the girls played. Were the girls playing cymbals? I don't remember. But so Greg Blossom, Don Venata, and a few others. And I remember one hotel, we were woken in the early morning hours by the sound of chickens clucking. And it's like it sounded like it was right on the other side of the wall from where we were. So it was like that was a time, yeah. So so that was a fun extra activity in high school. And then I did play baseball a couple of years, but I was not a very good baseball player. And so my junior year, I decided to go out for the musical. So I auditioned for the musical. And I remember I remember the auditions, and the person auditioning before me was one of my classmates, Steve Goodhue, who was playing in a band at the time professionally already, played guitar, but played piano also, and played the Elton John song Daniel on piano and sang, beautifully, and like I had to follow him. So I didn't have any accompaniment. I sang a Beach Boys song, and I did get a part, but I got a smaller part. And Steve Goodhue should have gotten the lead, but this was always sort of an undercurrent rumor in the drama club, is that the Schreppels, who ran the drama club, had played favorites with certain students that they liked. So the guy that got the lead was maybe not the best voice for the lead, but Steve got a little bit bigger part than I got. And the next year, he went on to get the lead in the musical. So the one we were in was Guys and Dolls, which was a lot of fun, and there were a lot of my friends were in that show. So Jim Waffle, who passed away at a young age, Don Venata was in that group too, and Steve had the lead, and Steve had a supporting role, and Greg Brennan was the lead, and Mark Bashaw was the other lead. They were actually two male big parts for the boys, but anyway. And so the next year, I don't think I did anything in the spring my senior year. Goofed off a little bit, but Steve Goodhue got the lead part. And he went on to a career in music and lives in Nashville and plays music professionally. I think he's coming up for the reunion. I hope so.
When did you find out that you got accepted into? Well, you went to Brandeis first, right?
Yeah.
And when did you get your acceptance? And
I don't remember. Actually, it was in the summertime, I think. I don't think I had finished. And I had the advantage that my sister had gone to Brandeis ahead of me when I had visited her. So I had visited the campus. And I applied to a couple of other schools, including Brown University. So Brown was my sort of reach school. And Brown had a wrestling team, and I was very anxious to try and wrestle in college. And their coach had sent me a letter saying, yes, we want you here. And I was, at that time, the Ivy Leagues were categorizing their applicants so you could be rejected, or you could get I don't know what it was called, like a maybe, or you could be accepted. And I was in the maybe category. And something like a third of the maybes got eventually admitted. So I was in the maybe category, and I'm like, got my fingers crossed open. And I always blame this on one of my Hilton classmates, John Ritter, who was a little smarter than me, probably had a little bit better grades. I think he was like 8th in our class, and I was 11th or something, tied for 11th, something like that. And his older siblings had all gone to Brown, so he was a little bit of a legacy there. So he got in, and I always blame him for not going, because he got in there but went to Cornell. It's like, hey man, if you weren't going to go there, why'd you apply? They were only going to take one kid from Hilton. Right. They took him, but anyway. So I think it was in the summer I got a letter, early summer, that I had been accepted at Brandeis, and that was nice because now my sister and I, for a couple of years at least, could carpool.
Right.
So I remember buying our first car. We paid $900 for a Ford Maverick, and it lasted the 2 years. It was one of the most reliable cars I ever owned. I don't think I've ever owned another Ford since, but the Maverick started every winter morning, and I kept it. Actually, it was those 2 years that we had it, and my sister and I kind of shared it for those 2 years, and then the 2 years, my junior and senior year, I kept the car, so I had it for 4 years.
You mentioned when you were growing up, you started doing a little bit of work at your dad's practice. Any other jobs that you did throughout growing up before you hit college?
Other than kind of the odd jobs as a little kid, like mowing my neighbor's lawn or something like that, I don't think, and occasionally I got paid for doing jobs around the house. I remember trying to do like household chores that my mother would pay us like a quarter for or $1 to try to get money for the carnival. That was one of the big early summer things.
Big money makers?
Yeah, try to make money. So I, try to make money with odd jobs so I would have money to spend at the carnival. So I don't remember having any other jobs. Jason did more stuff. He did some farm work, picked fruit and stuff like that. But I don't think I ever did anything else other than the stuff that I did at the office. And I worked at the office during the break between freshman and sophomore year of college, and I think even between sophomore and junior year of college. Between junior and senior year of college, I stayed up in Waltham and had a research job, which was one of the best experiences there. I had a professor who I had become close to, who I did an independent study with and research as a senior. So she had applied for a grant to get me essentially a salary for the summer. So I did stuff in her lab and then went on and did, took coursework or took it as independent study coursework. So, and she went on to become a very, very famous neuroscientist. And
what
still
type of research was it?
Neuroscience. Her experimental model was the Pacific Coast lobster, specifically a little ganglion of 30 cells in this lobster that control the motion of the stomach muscles in the lobster. So a very specific experimental preparation, but the idea was to try to find ways to map how the neurons in that ganglion, so there's 30 cells in this ganglion, how to map how they're interacting with each other. It's sort of like telling each other what to do. So if you think of that as a really, really, really scaled down way that a brain functions, so with lots and lots of cells interacting with each other, some telling their other neighbor cells do this, some telling them do that, be quiet, be active, sort of beginning to get the ideas of, in a simplified system, how complex neurologic systems work. And it was, I think, brilliant, a brilliant idea. And she later became working closely with the biophysics department and the computer science department, developed ways to use computer modeling to enhance what she's actually recording from these individual cells. So it was very complex and it became more complex, but she really sort of teased it apart. But she became internationally recognized in her field. She was president of the international, some sort of neuroscience society. And I think she's actually still teaching and still doing research. But one of my nieces, who's a scientist herself now, she now has a lab of her own at CUNY down in New York City, met the woman I had worked with as an undergrad at a conference or something. And it's like, was excited to meet her. It's like, oh yeah, I knew her when she was like a junior professor. I think she was a clinical or instructor or something like that. She wasn't a tenured professor at the time. And she herself was a Brandeis alumnus and had a lot of funny stories about what it was like to be an undergrad in the flower power, in the mid to late 60s, mid to late 60s. So she was an interesting character.
Now you retired in 2024. Mm-hmm. How have you been spending your retirement days? You already said you babysit.
Yeah, babysit my grandchildren.
Dogs, you said?
Yeah, my dogs. But we've always had dogs. But we got suckered into getting 2 dogs to replace the last dog. So yeah, the last dog died 5 years ago, and we were working with a North Paw Rescue, which is a local mostly dogs rescue agency. And one of our nurses had gotten a dog through North Paw, so she recommended them. So we went to see one of the gals that was fostering these dogs from this litter of coonhounds that they had gotten in, and she had two of them. And so we went to see them, and they were very cute, and they were running toward us. And I said, my wife and I both looked at each other and like, can we take both of them? And we ended up doing that. We ended up actually not getting the two that we saw. We took one of them, and the agency wanted us to take a male and a female. So we did take a different dog in that same litter. So we have siblings, but they took a lot of time initially. Now they sort of run a little more independently. So it's still a little bit of work and a little bit of busy time in terms of taking care of them. But, I do more gardening. I'm trying to be a little bit more scientific and intentional about gardening. So actually taking care of the plants once I put them in the ground or fertilizing it. Yeah, trying to learn how to pollinate zucchini, because we have we built or had built a perennial garden, which we've been trying to maintain, and has lots of flowering plants in it. And it's, when you go in there to weed, you can hear the bees buzzing. I mean, it's just full of bees. But then they go like 50 feet away to the area that we have our vegetables planted, and there's not any bees around. So I'm like, am I going to have to self-pollinate these zucchinis? And I noticed the last couple of years, we'll get a lot of flowers on the plants and a lot of little zucchinis that never form into a full fruit. And this is one of those things that you don't find out unless you look into it. I didn't study botany, and I never knew much about agriculture, and even living in an agricultural community, I'm ashamed to say I don't know much about agriculture. Mm-hmm. That zucchinis have both male and female flowers, and the female flower will have a little nub of a fruit forming at the base of the flower, but it won't develop into a full fruit. It'll start to and then atrophy unless that gets pollinated. And I learned the different characteristics between the male and female flower. So I have to get an opportunity to get out there in the morning when the flowers are open with a little paintbrush, a little like one of those really thin paintbrush, and take some pollen from one of the male flowers. I'm going to try it. Same thing happens with cucumbers. And so I'm beginning to figure out, again, I have enough time to scroll through it. And of course, all you have to do is put it in your phone once that you're interested in why your zucchini plants aren't fruiting. And now I got so much stuff, so many suggestions of how to deal with zucchini. I thought the worst thing was the joke around here is everybody has so much zucchini they don't know what to do with it in the summer months. And everybody puts a little table at the end of their driveway and says free, zucchini and yellow squash, but whatever. And they're trying to get rid of zucchinis that look like a football, but so yeah, it's when I didn't have the time to keep after that when I was actively working. So hopefully I have a little time to keep after it now and actually weed the perennial bed and try to set up swings for my grandchildren in the backyard and stuff like that. Yeah, troubleshoot the swings. Fix my house, which as it's getting older is needing more TLC. So yeah.
Do you ever stop being a doctor?
Probably not. That you sort of, I'll notice things about people in public. Somebody's limping or something doesn't look right. I don't think I've ever gotten to the point where I've been on a plane and looked at somebody and said, you should get that skin thing checked.
Have you ever been in a spot where, is there a doctor here anywhere?
Yes. Not on a plane. Yeah, kind of a way out there story. Mindy and I and a couple that we've taken some travels with were traveling in Peru, and we had gone to Machu Picchu, famous Incan site, archaeological site, and my buddy Scott and I had gotten a permit. You need a special permit to climb the mountain that goes above Machu Picchu, called Huayna Picchu. So it's an additional 1,200 feet vertical above Machu Picchu, which is at about 8,500 feet altitude. So Mindy and Alice stayed behind, and our guide and Scott and I set on a climb up Huayna Picchu. And we get about a third of the way up, and there's a guy lying on the ground, an older-looking gentleman lying on the ground, awake, but not feeling good. And like I just checked his pulse, and it was irregular. And I said, "Have you ever had atrial fibrillation before?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, I think you have atrial fibrillation now." And we gave them some suggestions: drink a little more water and rest a bit, and then walk down slowly, because clearly he wasn't going to get any care halfway up this mountain.
Right.
And probably from once you got down to where the main archaeological site is, there's a road that that ends at the gate there. They could get him down to the town below by road. But that's the one time where I actually got involved with something. There might have been some other times, mostly when I would be on vacation and we would be on a trail or someplace like that. I don't think I ever had any situations where I'm walking along a city street or in an airplane where. But I've often thought of what I would do, because half the people say, "Don't let them know you're a doctor," and the other people, that there are stories of people having saved somebody's life by volunteering their services. And so I've thought about it some, but it's only happened on rare occasions.
Okay. How has medicine changed over the years? You've kind of implying a little bit about record keeping, and
record keeping is totally different now because it's all electronic, and communicating is different because again, a lot of communications happen electronically rather than by phone and phone messages. So it's changed. So on the receiving end, it used to be at the end of the day, I'd have a little stack of charts on my desk, and they would have phone messages on them. So I could, quickly go through those. And if I needed to call the patient, I would, or if I'd write a response to the message, and it would go back out, and the secretarial staff would call the patient back about the message. But now it's in your inbox on the computer. And it's much less common to be able for the doctor to send that back to a staff member to deal with. You're going to have to, you have to respond. So for primary care docs especially, there's a lot more of that to do. The other thing is your progress notes. For most of my career, I dictated progress notes onto a little handheld tape recorder. And then we had a full-time transcriptionist that would type it and stick it in the chart. Now you're responsible for generating the note. And you can use voice recognition, and which has gotten gradually better. Dragon is the medical program that does voice recognition. So you can dictate that way. But it meant like wearing a headset with a microphone around all day, which I didn't want to do. And so it meant typing. And again, there are shortcuts you can learn, but if this isn't part of your background, it takes time to learn them. And, I always sort of kick myself for not taking the time to learn some of those and making my last few years in practice a little easier on myself. But I didn't. So I was always trying to find time to finish my notes and not get too far behind in that. And, we were running into situations where I had a partner who was so far behind in their notes and just couldn't seem to keep up that we parted ways. Because, and particularly once you're not your own boss, but when you're your own boss, you can't really bill for something that's not yet documented. So it holds up your billing cycle. And again, once you're owned by a different entity, they don't like their billing cycle to be held up. So they're after you to make sure your notes are all finished. So that was very different.
has AI changed it?
It will change it. And again, if it's used carefully, it could probably make things easier. It can make diagnoses a little easier and better, but there's a danger of relying on it too much. I think people are finding that out. Teachers are finding it out. You don't have to probably worry about third graders using AI to to do their homework. But I talk to people that are high school teachers, and they're like, they'd rather AI didn't exist,
right?
Because it's not all that easy. And most of the time, it's that the product looks too good to be from the student that was handing you junk before. So I think that's one of the dangers. But it makes mistakes, and in I talk to my wife a lot about this in law, and lawyers that use AI will sometimes hallucinate cases and cite cases that don't exist as precedent or to back up an argument. It'll cite cases, no, that doesn't exist. And same thing with medical research. It'll sometimes cite cases that don't exist or that really weren't on point. So I think that the users of AI in any profession are going to have to be very careful to still have the oversight, and you still got to read the product. But there'll be places that it's useful. But all this stuff has, no doubt, and the pressure to gradually stay on a schedule where you're seeing a certain number of patients in a day, and it's worse in some specialties than others. But sort of takes away your ability to spend time. So in the last few years of my practice, I had much fewer times where I would talk to the patient about anything else other than what they were there for. Where early in my practice, it was common to have a few minutes of what I call chit chat. So how is your family doing? Is Johnny that I saw last week gotten over their strep throat without having them come back to see Johnny again? His mom came in the next week, so I could ask her, how's your son doing? Very, gradually less and less time for that. People are staying in practice not as long and not staying in one place as long. So the ability to get to know your patients in a personal way is less and less. And I think fewer and fewer people had the thing that I was talking about earlier that I got from my dad, which is that I wanted people to know who I was. I didn't care if people knew where I lived. I didn't care if people knew my phone number. My home phone number was on the message tape at the office. So when I was on call, actually we just got rid of our second phone line. When our kids were young, we had we got a second phone line so our kids could talk to their friends on the phone without tying up the line that I needed to be open so patients could reach me when I was on call. So, the person at the phone company really wanted to know why we wanted to get rid of both landlines. None of your business. We just don't want two landlines anymore. But that attitude is much less. I think practitioners now want to be protected from, and this happened actually when I was in practice. One of my partners for a period of time lived in the city and was working in Hilton. And that was the first thing that distanced her in a way that myself and Bob Blackburn and Eric Cederstrom all lived. Eric lived in Greece off of North Greece Road, but his kids were in the Hilton district. Bob lived in Spencerport district, but he lived like just a little south of Ridge Road. So he was clearly within our service area. Our service area was crazy huge area-wise. I mean, I had patients that lived in Waterport and patients that lived in Rochester in the city, or Dewey, that area of Greece, the Greece-Rochester border, and as far south as Victor, maybe, or that way, Churchville certainly, and all the way, to the lake. So it was a big area, but the idea that you would want to live in that area and, oh my goodness, patients know where you live, didn't bother me, the patients. Now I think physicians want to separate their personal life from their career a lot more. They want to keep their distance. But that was one of the things that I observed about my dad that I liked, and one of the reasons why, when I joined my dad's practice, I was like, yeah, we're going to live in town. We're going to live in this school district or at least this neighborhood area. So, but that's going away. And the other thing that's happening is that mid-level practitioners are becoming more prominent. And
that's the PA you're talking about?
PA and nurse practitioners, and the health systems are realizing that they can be good for them economically, so they want these people more. I think there's fewer physicians supervising them, and I think a lot of physicians are feeling slighted or disrespected. And I don't think you could find anybody that would say, oh, I don't want to work with an NP or PA. It's like, yeah, I'm fine with working with them, but you have to realize that their level of expertise is not the same as mine. Stop saying that, an independent nurse practitioner, particularly one that's just starting out, or an independent PA, can handle a primary care, handle the kind of detail in a primary care that a physician can. And it worked. We had a good model in the sense that we had a good physician to mid-level ratio. And we had, for the most part, almost all the mid-levels that we worked with one exception maybe, that was maybe a little more independent than she warranted. But everybody else, even when their skill level had gotten pretty high, was very cognizant of the idea that we were there as a resource for them, and we were there to make sure things happened the right way. And they worked within that system, and that was fine with them. They wanted the backup, and again, the ones that we had that were veterans, dentists who had been with us many years, it became very rare that they would ask a question about a particular patient and tell me what they thought, and I had a different opinion. That became just very rare, just because they had gotten so much clinical experience. But particularly now, you have new people coming in and at mid-level positions without the kind of mentoring and without the kind of training that they need. And I talked with my daughter-in-law about this, and I think some of the people that are attending physicians are, they're so busy. I have to sort of forgive them for being so busy that they don't want to spend a lot of their time mentoring the mid-levels. It pays off eventually when the mid-level becomes skilled enough that you can trust them to operate on their own. But in the beginning, it takes more of your time. And, you have to be prepared to have them come and pull you out of an exam room and say, hey, I need you to look at this patient with me. And, we just accepted that as part of what we did. If we want to have mid-levels, we're going to have to be okay with being interrupted once in a while, or having to help them out. And, that was the model we had. And I think it worked better. Now it's very much looser, so. And you still get people that practice long enough within a specialty or within a clinical area that they get good and they're very reliable. But it's that early time period where people don't have the skills or don't get the skills because everything they learned from other mid-levels instead of learning it from a clinician that was really an expert in that area. So now every specialty is using mid-levels. So and in every area, they're in the operating room, they're in the medical wards, they're in the doctor's offices. So that's been sort of a gradual change, but I think it's become more prominent now.
Thank you for that answer. What do you think defines our community?
I don't know. I think there's there's different words that you sort of think of when you think of small town America.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcoming. There was always things going on that gave a sense of community. Everything from, having a volunteer fire department, having teachers and coaches and other professionals live in the community and be part of the community. Our various community events. I think, people having a sense of, I'll say, respect for their neighbors for the most part, and a willingness to accept some differences and still feel like this person can be part of the community. I think it's changed some because there's been more mobility in and out of the community. So there's more people that are here that don't have a long history in town, and a lot of people that did have whose families had a lot of history have gradually drifted away. But I always felt that way. And I think that's one of the things that actually influenced me to come back. It sort of influenced me to go into primary care, and then when I was deciding where I was going to practice, influenced me to come back. My dad needed me at the time as well, and the community needed me. But so I thought, I'll I'll be welcome here for a variety of reasons. I think when I went away to start my education and my medical training, it was on good terms. Nobody was cheering, saying, "Hey, we're glad to be rid of that juvenile delinquent." But so, and a lot of I had just a tinge of concern about what it would be like to practice with my peers as patients. It never happened that there was a problem. Some of the people that I had gone to school with came to me as a physician, and they were never in doubt of. They never expressed any doubt about their confidence in me for what they were, whatever they were coming for, or my my confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the rewarding things about practicing. Is like, wow, I did something right, because people are willing to put some trust in me,
right.
And so that was, again, one of the rewarding things about practicing in your hometown. So,
well, you were also Hilton alumni class of 2003, the Hall of Fame.
yes.
Do you remember who told you, and how did that make you feel?
I really felt I felt great about it, that somebody was willing to recognize me, in that way. And I've been interested to see the people that were preceded me and that have come after me, and thought, yeah, I don't mind being part of that club
Mm-hmm.
at all, because
Mm-hmm.
they were all people that I thought were big contributors and went on to big things, after their time in Hilton. So I don't remember how I found out. I think I got a letter.
Okay.
It was in the mail, but I'm pretty sure it was Chucky.
Because he's in there too at some point.
Is he? I don't know if he's in the Alumni Hall of Fame or the Sports Hall of Fame. He deserves to be in both.
No, I think he's in the alumni for sure. I read the other day.
He finished his career with more than 300 varsity wrestling wins, so that's something to be said. I think that was more than Krotzen. I give Krotz credit for just bringing wrestling into into the mainstream of high school sports for us. And the next thing will be girls. It's the fastest growing high school sport in the United States.
Girls wrestling?
Girls wrestling, the fastest growing. And something like at the collegiate level, something like 30 or 40 colleges added women's wrestling this past year to their part of it is Title IX, I think. If they have a men's wrestling team now, if there's an interest, then they're willing to. They have to have a women's team. But the American women have been very successful internationally, and it's been just fun to watch that. And I was hoping that my granddaughters, but I'm still hoping that my grandsons I can convince them to be wrestlers.
Didn't you Hilton Healthcare work for the school district at some point as physicians?
Yeah, we did. We did the athletic physicals for several years, and bus driver physicals, and then we would do the sports physicals. So we did that, and at some point, the district decided to, and this is sort of part of what's happening with the corporatization of medicine, is that the larger groups that did occupational health care were getting big enough and offered to do all the workman's comp, all the bus driver physicals, and all the athletic physicals. So gradually districts started using these bigger groups that were doing that, where it was sort of one group was doing everything the school needed, in terms of interacting with a medical professional. So we were gradually sort of moved out. It was really much on the side for us that, it wasn't a big thing to have it disappear, but it was enjoyable for me because I always liked following the sports teams, the high school sports teams, and the various athletes that, and keeping track of who's going on to play in college, who's signing with colleges. And it was great, of course, to watch Yanni's career at Cornell and after. And I particularly, of course, paid more attention to the wrestlers.
What advice would you give to a student interested in medicine or pursuing any higher education?
Wow. I still think that, and part of the problem is it's just become too expensive. So there are arguments both for and against pursuing a liberal arts education. I was fortunate enough to get a liberal arts education, and if I look back on my college career, it was like, wow, there were even more courses that I would have liked to have taken in non-science areas or non-medical areas. So I think there's still value to the liberal arts education. I think you can find it, and you can find it in a way that still might be affordable, particularly from in the state university system. I mean, I think the state university system institutions are one of the last bargains in higher education. In terms of going into medicine, I think if people are interested in the science, I mean, there's two aspects of it. One is the science aspect, and one is the service aspect. So the science aspect, I always had an interest in how things work, how the body works, how to diagnose things, how to make them better. So if you have that interest, that's one thing. But the other part is, the service part is knowing you're going to have a relationship with a patient where you have a particular obligation, and they have certain expectations and obligations. So you have to be, in most specialties, you have to be willing to sort of deal with both of those. There are some subspecialties in medicine where you don't have to deal with patients very much. Like you can sit in a dark room as a radiologist and just read imaging studies all day, which I would have found tremendously boring. But the people that like the science stuff, but not the other stuff, not the interpersonal stuff, they can always go into radiology or pathology, sit in your lab, and you look at dead tissue under a microscope. There's a guy who's actually, I think he's trained as an ophthalmologist, who does TikTok videos where he portrays all the different specialties, and in his portrayal he uses the stereotypes of those specialties. So when he's doing an internal medicine person, it's always somebody that can never make a firm decision. If it's a surgeon, it's always somebody that's being a jerk to the other person. If it's the pathologist, his pathologist character doesn't have any relationship with people, he has a relationship with his microscope. So he's given a name to his microscope. And the guy's stuff he's very talented, but his stuff is very hysterical. But it's sort of is a funny way of portraying how your life might be like in all the different medical specialties in sort of a stereotyped way. But with only those few exceptions, going back to what you were saying before, you have to be prepared to have that service type of relationship with patients. So anyway,
before I have one last question, but just going to go through some rapid fire here. What's your favorite food?
Oh, wow. I don't eat it very often, but lobster.
Favorite TV show? If you watch TV.
I do watch TV, but I don't watch TV shows so much as I watch now that things have changed. I've been watching a lot of historical fiction. And of the stuff I've watched lately, I still really like Outlander. My wife and I watched the Outlander. We actually even subscribed to an additional streaming service to watch the last season. And now we're like looking, if we travel to Scotland, we got to go to where, to the, what do they call that? Sort of like, I don't know, people that travel to things that are on fictional stories or TV. Travel to real places that were fictionalized. TV tourism?
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
So people and this is already a thing with Outlander, people go to where the stones that transport the characters back in time are in Scotland near Inverness. And there are these, it's kind of like Stonehenge, an archaeological site where there is some type of rock formation. You have the standing stones of Karnak, which are on the French coast. You have Stonehenge. You have again, I can't remember what it's called. The stones that transport the characters in Outlander, again near Inverness. But so I'm looking at a trip to England and Scotland. It's like, oh, there's Inverness. We have to stop and see the stones.
Well, now
but Outlander.
Outlander. Do you have a favorite vacation spot?
I'd have to say the Finger Lakes. We've gone to various places in the Finger Lakes, but probably in the last 25 years, we've gone 22 of those somewhere in the Finger Lakes.
Didn't you have a fun fact for me before we went on the air about that?
Oh, well.
Did you already say it? About the most green?
No, we were talking about where the greatest surface area of fresh water, but I said Finger Lakes, but it was not correct. It's the Great Lakes.
All right, Great Lakes. All right.
The Great Lakes have the biggest area in the world. That's
do you have a favorite movie?
Young Frankenstein.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that a comedy or is that a...
You've not seen Young Frankenstein?
Was it before my time?
Oh my God. Do you know who Mel Brooks is?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so then it's a comedy.
It's a Mel Brooks comedy.
Okay.
So Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles
Yes.
were two of his very famous comedies. And one of the greatest things about both of them, but Young Frankenstein for me a little bit more than Blazing Saddles, it's like full of super actors, some of whom in this movie took smaller parts. So Young Frankenstein has Gene Wilder in the lead role, but in the supporting roles, Marty Feldman, Terry Garr, Madeline Kahn, Cloris Leachman, Gene Hackman. Who plays the monster? Plays the Frankenstein monster? Peter Boyle. So, and it's just I was on TV the other night, and I'm channel surfing, and it comes on, and like I got to watch a little bit of it, and I realized I know all the gags now. I know all, and it's every kind of joke that there is. There's puns. There's sight gags. There's every avenue of humor that would make you laugh. There's stereotypes. There's irony. There's all these different ways of that in every little bit of scene, and some of which he repeats in the movie. It gets a laugh once, so he's going to do it again. So that movie for me is, and his later stuff I always laugh at. Blazing Saddles is also good, and Spaceballs was pretty good.
I'm going to take a watch. We'll take a look.
Oh yeah, you got to see Young Frankenstein. So.
Do you have a favorite book?
A favorite book
or genre of book, if you can.
I like historical fiction, so I've read the stuff I've read mostly is like Michener, James Michener. I don't read spy novels or things like that much. I read some nonfiction, and historical fiction is probably the biggest genre. I got away from reading as a recreation from, when I was practicing, because any reading I did, I was reading journals and things like that. And then over the years, I've had a couple eye issues and eye surgeries, and I find that when I try to read, I can't focus on print for more than a few pages.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife keeps encouraging me to get a Kindle. She uses a Kindle or some type of reader where I can enlarge the font, or use audiobooks. The other problem was I live so close to work that a lot of people say, I love audiobooks. I listen to them to and from work. Well, it only took me 3.5 minutes to get to work. So I never got into audiobooks because it didn't take me long enough to get to and from work.
Well, you're a man in the 70s growing up. Do you have a favorite musical group or genre?
I'm a classic rock person.
Okay.
So in the process of planning this reunion, our high school years were the classic album rock years, the early to mid 70s. So one of the things I sort of volunteered to do was to create a playlist for the reunion. And what I did was I went back and looked up Billboard Top 100 for the years 1972 to 1976. And out of those 100 songs each year, I picked about 20, which was too many.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got done, I looked back and thought, how come this song or that song that I remember isn't on the list? And I realized that Billboard only put the top 100 songs that had been released as singles. So some of the most popular songs were released as singles, but some songs that were fairly popular amongst our listening group that were on albums that we liked never were released as singles. So I had to go back and think of some of the album rock songs and stuff from Aerosmith and other groups like that and put them on the list. And then I had to start chopping it down because it was 7.5 hours long or something. The party is going to be 5 to 10.
Yeah, why don't you plug your reunion a little bit about what's planned?
I should do that. So the class of 76 is having our 50th reunion. It's going to be held September 26th at West Creek Lodge. There is a website and a Facebook page for the reunion. I think the website is hiltonclassof76.com. And that will lead people to the info about how to get tickets and things like that. Tickets are on sale. There's going to be buffet dinner. There's going to be some raffles. There's going to be, again, music, not live music. We sort of decided that people want to catch up and talk so much that live music, and we have several classmates that are musical and are still playing, professionally. But they want to sit and visit with their friends and stuff too, and not play to entertain everybody else. So we decided on having a DJ and being able to use a curated playlist like the one I made up. So I discovered that the song that was the theme to Welcome Back Kotter, which is probably before your time.
No, I know the song. I know the show. Yeah.
Was written by John Sebastian, who was a sort of folk rock singer, and came out in the time period that I had blocked off. So that's the opening song on the playlist.
Nice. Nice. Do you have a favorite leisure activity?
Favorite leisure activity? I did ski a lot, but I have not snow skied in the last few years. Snow skiing, we took a lot of ski vacations, but now I've done bike riding in the past, but that's one thing I'm able to do more of now. So I would say bike riding, gardening, and travel. We're trying to plan more trips. Actually, one of the things that my wife and I are trying to do is visit as many of the national parks as we can. So one of our college classmates who was very active in our college alumni association. He was a photographer when we were in college, and he used to make up slideshows that he put to music. And he became very involved with the alumni. He was eventually alumni association president of the alumni association for a while, or chairperson for a while. But he and his wife had visited all 64 national parks, including the one in American Samoa, which is, for most people, the hardest one because it's in the middle of the South Pacific. Mm-hmm. So when I saw that they had achieved that over the years, and some of those were when their kids were young and some were more recent when their kids were grown up. So Mindy and I have been trying to hit as many national parks as we can.
How many are you up to?
I don't know the number. We may be halfway there.
Oh, wow.
I mean, a lot of it was done when I was younger, our kids were younger, so we had gone to the Grand Canyon and the Everglades and a few places. The Everglades I went to as a kid. But last spring we went to Utah. When our kids were younger, we went to the parks on the eastern part of Utah, so Arches and Canyonlands. And then just last spring we went to Zion and Bryce Canyon. And then in a couple of weeks we're going to Alaska. We should be able to knock off 4 national parks in this one trip coming up.
Nice.
So yeah, this is going to be a very efficient trip. Denali, Wrangell Elias National Park, Kenai Fjords National Park, and Glacier Bay National Park.
Do you have a map at home? You put stick pins in there?
I don't, but we should. But I did buy an album or paper album. It has, each national park has a page, and then on the facing page you can write what you did there and whether you liked it or not. I don't know if there's a place to put pictures, but
cool.
I've been trying to save pictures of in trying to make up albums in my phone. We'll see what kind of capacity my phone has.
One more favorite, and then one final question. If you could pick 3 people from history to have dinner with, who would they be and why?
Ooh, wow.
Could be family, could be historical figures.
Yeah, I don't know that my family is as interesting as the historical figures. I think Leonardo da Vinci. I'm very fascinated with Einstein, but I don't think I could understand anything he would have to say, or much of what he would have to say. So, skipping Einstein. Um, I'm gonna go with Thomas Jefferson, just because I could figure out a lot of the revolutionary stuff that was happening, Revolutionary period, and I think is an interesting character. How about somebody more modern? Let's see.
Anybody in the medical field? I don't know.
There's a lot of people that interest me, and I had a lot and read some about various historical characters in the medical field. Da Vinci himself was very was a study of it, at least anatomy in terms of the medical sciences, and I think got into trouble from dissecting bodies. But one of his characteristics as a painter was to be able to depict the human form in a very realistic way, because he knew what it looked like on the inside. So, more modern. This figure's controversial. I will say. Maybe the woman, and I can't remember her name now. She's an astronomer who, in some of the articles about how women discovered things but men got the credit for it, she's the woman astronomer that showed that hydrogen was the most abundant element in the universe. And basically one of her peers sort of pirated her PhD thesis. She was the first woman, I think, to get a PhD in astronomy. I don't remember where she went, but I remember just reading the story recently and finding her story pretty fascinating. And some of the other women that this happened to are also very interesting. Marie Curie and Rosalind Franklin are two of the other ones. Marie Curie is a more familiar name. They tried to give her first Nobel Prize to her husband, who actually, to his credit, Pierre Curie refused to accept it. They won the second Nobel Prize together, and were awarded it together. But her first Nobel Prize was going to be awarded to Pierre Curie, and he declined to accept it, and so it was awarded to her. Rosalind Franklin was a woman who probably really worked out the double helix structure of DNA, but it was Watson and Crick that got the credit. There is a medical school named after her, but in history she's largely forgotten. So they made the movie about the woman. Is it Katherine Johnson, the woman in Hidden Figures that did the math that got the Mercury and Gemini astronauts, into space and back again. So those stories, those kinds of people that persevered in science, but those are the stories that their stories, to hear their story on a personal basis would be interesting to me.
Okay. Last question, and then I'll close. Dr. Zoghlin, you've cared for this community for much of your life. As you look back, what would you like your legacy to be, not just as a physician, but as a member of the Hilton community?
Wow. I guess I would just say a contributor. So if people thought that I contributed and that I had the community's interest at heart, that I wasn't entirely a self-interest. I wasn't not self-interested. I had some of my own interest at heart, but that I wasn't entirely self-interested in terms of my place in the community. That I don't think of. I think there are a lot of people that did very special things here, for the community, and maybe my dad and Jeff Stead did more. They built something that I had the advantage of getting, and being able to work in that at that. But and I haven't done as much in the public realm as some other people. But yeah, just a contributor, and an honest contributor, I guess I would say. So,
Well, thank you very much for that honesty and the humility as well. Thank you very much for joining me on the Big H podcast in your service to the Hilton community. Congratulations on your retirement, so justly deserved, and for being a vital member of our Hilton community. Folks, if you like what you saw, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can follow me on X, Rumble, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Facebook at the Big H Podcast. Dr. Zoghlin, being one of your patients in the past, it's been an honor having you on. And for everyone, I can truly say thank you for being part of our lives.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find